Welcome to the Sideline Report, everyone. I'm Marvin Jackson, along with Donna Hopkins. And Donna, we got a victory, huh?
Slim victory, but a win is a win.
All right, and that's what Joe Gibbs said. But, you know, let's talk a little bit about Redskin history. You know, this is the 75th anniversary of the Washington Redskins, and you know a little bit about that history, don't you?
Quite a bit, but not all. And I know there's a lot out there.
All right. Well, there is a guy who knows it all. He wrote the Redskins Encyclopedia, and his name is Michael Richman, and we spent some time with him with our favorite tailgaters just before the game. All right, everybody, I am in tailgate heaven. I'm with some of my favorite tailgaters, right? Hey,
there you go.
Ronnie Jr., Sr., and we got Gus and Big Mike. And these guys, they know a lot about football, but my special guest is Mr. Mike Richman, and he knows everything there is about Redskin football. This is his book, Redskins Encyclopedia. He wrote this book. It took him about 7 years, I believe, to write it.
That's correct.
And Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and why you started writing the Redskins history?
Well, I'm a native Washingtonian, and when I was a kid, I dreamed of writing a book about football. In the 6th grade, I wrote a book called The Amateur Who Played Like a Pro. It was a little story. It was bound, 6th grade, so it was something I was thinking about. And then when George Allen came to coach the Redskins in 1971, I started to bleed burgundy and gold. The Redskins went to the playoffs 5 times during the Allen era. Then I ended up studying journalism in college. So by the late 90s, I was a stringer for the Associated Press, and I was covering the Redskins. I was going to Redskins practices, working at Redskins games, and I just eventually packaged the whole thing together, my journalistic skills and my tremendous passion for the Redskins, and sold the idea to a publisher.
All right, now talk about how the Redskins got started. I mean, they did not start here in Washington, and they were not the Redskins when they first started, right?
That's correct. Their very first season was in 1932 in Boston, and they were called the Boston Braves. It wasn't until the following year, 1933, that they became the Redskins. The team played for 5 seasons in Boston and then moved to Washington in 1937.
And the owner was George Preston Marshall, right?
That's correct.
And talk a little bit about this guy. He's a pretty controversial owner, right?
He was very controversial. I'll start from the very beginning. He owned a laundry business here in Washington called the Palace Laundry, and he was a very well-to-do person financially, and he wanted to invest in a sports team. So he purchased a basketball team in what was then the American Basketball League in 1925, and he owned that team for 3 years. The team didn't do very well financially or record-wise, but in the league he met George Halas, the owner of the Chicago Bears, who also owned a team in the basketball league, and he met a guy named Joe Carr, who was the commissioner in both leagues, and Halas and Carr influenced him to invest in an NFL team. He purchased the rights to a defunct franchise in Newark, New Jersey in 1931 and located it in Boston in 1932. As far as the controversy, the Redskins were the last team in the league to integrate, and Marshall for many years did not want to sign a black player. After World War II, black players started coming into the NFL in larger numbers, but he refused to do so. The theory is that he didn't want to alienate a Southern fan base. The Redskins
were the team of the South.
That's right. The Redskins for many years were the southernmost team in the NFL, and Marshall had racist feelings, and in addition he was playing stereotypes. He just didn't want to alienate his Southerners who were coming up to Washington to attend games here and also watching the Redskins on television and helping with advertising on the Redskins broadcast network.
All right, now Bobby Mitchell comes in, what, 1961 was it? Or
Bobby Mitchell was here in 1962.
62.
He was actually one of 4 black players who came to the Redskins in 1962. But he was
the big star, the big name.
He was the first true black superstar on the Redskins.
Right, and that was probably one of the greatest moments in Redskins history, in my opinion, and I know you have your idea of some of the greatest moments in Redskins history. Since this year, the 75th anniversary, the Redskins are talking about those greatest moments, right?
Well, I have to think that the greatest moment in Redskins history is John Riggins' 43-yard run in Super Bowl 17. They gave the Redskins a 20-17 lead in the 4th quarter of that game, and then they went on to beat the Dolphins.
Their first Super Bowl victory.
27-7.
Right. Great play. And I think it's run so many times over and over.
Right. Well, that's just such an iconic moment in Redskins history. There are others. Kenny Houston tackling Walt Garrison at the goal line in a Monday night game in 1973, which preserved a 14-7 Redskins win over the Cowboys. Doug Williams in Super Bowl 22, his phenomenal performance in the second quarter of that game. And just prior to that, Darrell Green returning a punt against the Bears.
When he jumped over the player.
Right, jumped over the player and injured his ribs and still scored a touchdown that game.
Some great moments in Redskins history. Now, let's talk a little bit about this team this year. What's your opinion of this team? Are they going to get to the playoffs?
Well, I think the Redskins have to stop beating themselves. At this point, I believe they should be at least 4-1, if not 5-0. The Redskins could have beaten the New York Giants. They were ahead 17-3 at halftime of that game, but just sort of rolled over in the second half, and the Giants won that game. And then last week against the Packers, the Redskins were up, and then the Packers just came back.
All right, Mike, we're going to talk to some of the fans here, some of the tailgaters, and see if they know some of the history that you know. See if they can stump you, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's go to, let's see, Gus. Let's start with Gus. Okay. See if he knows any trivia.
When I was a kid, one of my favorite players was defensive tackle. He wore number 72, old Redskin, and I really wanted to know what happened to him. I mean, do you have him in your book at all?
Joe Rutkins is featured in my book. Yes, he's one of the greatest Redskins, according to the way I determined it, and did profile him. Joe Rutkins was a great defensive tackle in sort of the mid-'60s, early to mid-'60s. Then in the latter part of the decade, his career kind of tapered off. He had injuries that hurt his playing ability on the field.
All right, now let's go to Big Mike, see if Big Mike knows any trivia that he may be able to stump Mike Richman.
I don't know. It's a pretty big game in Redskin lore. It was at home. It was a championship game, and a certain player high-stepped into the end zone that set him off and got the start of the championship year going.
That, again, is one of the iconic moments in Redskins history. Darrell Grant intercepted a pass that had been tipped by Dexter Manley. The Cowboys quarterback at the time was Gary Hogeboom, and it was in the fourth quarter. The Cowboys still had a chance to come back in that game. They were behind 24-17. Manley came through, though, and tipped the pass by Hogeboom, and Darrell Grant picked it off, and as we know, the rest is history.
All right, there he is. Okay, how about you, Ron? Ron Jr. or Senior? You got a question?
Yeah, well, I guess mine is I'm a defensive type person, and so one of my favorite defensive middle linebackers wore number 55. So what I want to know is, who is he, and what was his nickname, and what was he famous for?
His name was Chris Hanberger. He was a great, great player. He holds the all-time Redskins record for Pro Bowl appearances with 9. And he was famous for tackling above the jawline. His nickname was the Hangman.
Very good. Very good, Mike. And where did he go to school?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. All right, pretty good. All right, and what was so unique about Sammy Baugh?
He was the first great, great passer in the NFL. He sort of revolutionized the game. Prior to his entry into the NFL, it was mostly a run-oriented game, and he just put up phenomenal numbers in his very first season, his rookie year. In the championship game against the Bears, for instance, the 28-21 Redskins win over the Bears in 37, he threw 3 touchdown passes, threw for more than 300 yards passing.
That was unheard of back then, right?
Oh, that was unheard of.
Yeah.
The NFL hadn't seen anything like that up to that point.
Now, one thing about him, I remember, he was a triple threat, right?
He was.
This guy could punt and pass and do it all.
And intercept passes.
Yeah, he played on defense.
Right,
yeah.
I would call him the greatest all-around player in NFL history.
Yeah.
When he retired, he held the NFL record for interceptions with 31, and to this day, he still holds the NFL single-season record for punting average with 51.4.
All right, so would you say he's probably the greatest all-time Redskin player, you think, as far as true statistics and all that?
I would say he and John Riggins are the greatest.
Okay. All right, there it is. And this is the greatest Redskin historian. Would you say that?
Yeah. Exactly. Very good.
All right, Mike
Thank you
Richman.
very much.
And now we're going to go and get some of the greatest tailgate food, right?
There you go.
All right. All right, thanks, guys.